Center for Diversity Leadership, where we are supporting school leaders together across the nation as they create school cultures that ensure all students are seen, valued, celebrated, and heard. I am Dr. Ryan Daniel.
And Dr. Edgardo Castro.
And we are
your fellows in this work.
All right, listen, you're not powerful because you're the leader. It is not your position that gives you power. It's how you make people feel, how you make others feel seen, understood, valued, and heard. School leaders must understand that in order to build a positive school culture, they must prioritize understanding the experiences and perspectives of others. Empathetic leadership is an essential component of school leadership. Lots of people are talking about empathy these days, and it's not hard to see why. Empathy is a key part of being a responsible and helpful community member at school and everywhere. For example, students who show empathy are less likely to bully. Empathy can also be a route to academic and career success because it helps people understand and work with others. They are peaceful, productive, and positive places where all teachers can teach and all students can learn. Although it doesn't necessarily take a lot of work to build empathy, it does take attention and commitment. But it is worth it for students, educators, and the school community. Today, we're talking about how can we as school leaders create a culture of empathy. Edgardo, why do you think empathy is such an important soft skill for school leaders?
So that's a very good question, Ryan, because empathy is imperative for school leaders, not only to understand, but deep dive. It is walking the talk. When we say that, so to empathize someone, you're putting your two shoes in the feet of the others, like your staff, teachers, and the community members. With the past 2.5 years with COVID, it is very easy to not understand people and move on with the things and programs that the district have. As a district leader now, I'm in a district supporting principals. I always talk to them that I empathize, not only that talking the walk, but also understanding that I have done that and that and building the trust as well. That goes building relationships and trusting each other. And so to empathize is such an important skill, and I think it's not just a soft skill but a hard skill to know, because it is, and nowadays moving forward, with still understanding that all students have that opportunity, closing that gap, we need to empathize each other and to be building each trust and, again, that relationships each other. So for you, what do you think is one ingredient that a school leader to have that, understanding, not just understanding?
But, I agree with you, Edgardo. I think that, to be empathetic is one of those skills that, like, as school leaders, we have to fine tune, because for some of us, it doesn't come natural. Like, I think naturally I'm an empathetic person, that I naturally, ensure that I can understand my teachers and understand my students. But it is, I do think that there's a such thing as empathy can run out. Like, after a while, like, I can be empathetic so much. And I think, for me, I think of it just yesterday. I had a pre-conference with one of my teachers who was not prepared at all. And he had not done his lesson plan. When we started unpacking and raveling, the layers, we realized that he was almost 3 units behind in his in the curriculum. So at that moment, I made a choice. I made a choice to empathize with him and find out Like, still hold him accountable. All right, okay, I'm noticing you're 3 units behind. So let's look at the calendar. Let's look at the schedule. How can we maybe combine some days, combine some units together? Because me ripping him to shreds, me, kind of making him feel defeated was going to make the pre-conference very unproductive. Right. And so I think as leaders, we have to understand that our teachers, our staff, they're coming to us with so many things happening outside of the school. And we have to be able to kind of listen with the goal to understand them. Because most of the time, people just need to feel heard. And then when I think of a teacher of mine who's really struggling with building relationships with her students because she is from a different cultural background than them. And I'm asking her questions of like, well, how have you gotten to know your students? Like, I'm hearing you make a lot of assumptions about what they can and they can't do. So, what are some ways that you have been curious, but genuinely curious, not with not leading with your bias, but really genuinely being curious about why they, maybe act a certain way or talk a certain way or feel a certain way. Because I'm trying to get her to understand, like, you have to look at it from their eyes. Because I think when we're empathetic, we're trying to walk in somebody else's shoes, but we've never lived that experience. So it's kind of, and when I think of like the difference between passion, sympathy, I think as leaders, sometimes they all can kind of get intertwined together. So how have you, Edgardo, in your leadership, working with, students of different in different areas and parts of the world, how have you really practiced maybe ensuring that you're being empathetic, but not showing pity?
Well, I'm just glad that you mentioned about empathy and accountability, because you can still be you can empathize and still have that accountability piece. So thank you for saying that, because again, the difference between empathy, pity, compassion, and sympathy, they are just interconnected. They're layers that same thing with cultures and diversity that we have in our centers, that these are just intertwined, interconnected together. And for me, to empathize someone, again, putting your your shoes in the feet of others. And pity for me is just an outside shallow that you're showing, kind of. When it comes to compassion and sympathy, they're almost similar, because Dr. Paul Ekman's really mentioned about to increase your emotional awareness, we need to have that compassion tag in. And so with that, the understanding of empathy, again, the pity and compassion and sympathize someone, there are layers interconnected, but there are different layers of of understanding, right? And so when you ask about my experience of different cultures and nationalities, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is really kind of in a drift. I put the diversity cultures together, embedding these areas of, I call it this social emotional, right? And deep inside, we are trying to learn how our teachers, like for us in our district, we actually have a program, a trauma-informed PD or training, that it's ongoing, not only giving to the principals, but to the teacher leaders as well. And we're moving on to next year to have a school-wide staff, including paraprofessionals and educators, and have that understanding. Because once a staff member, adult, don't have this layered, empathy, pity, compassion, and sympathy, I don't think they can relate and transfer that to our students. So the important thing is to have adults in our building, as again central office, and everybody understand deep dive what these different terminologies mean, and of course, our Center for Diversity Leadership will translate it into different cultures and ethnicities, and it can easily be misleading, right?
Yep.
Because why are you
Yep.
talking about empathy? What is your experience about that, Ryan? Because for me, it's not a different plate. It's a big plate, interconnected, intertwined
Yeah.
together. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that it is one of those skills that you're not taught in principal school, but you have to learn, really fast as a principal. And, for me, I've had the opportunity to lead 2 schools, and I've realized that what empathy looked like in one school community had to look a little bit different in my leadership in another community. And for our listeners, listen, take your pen down or get your phone and take these 3 notes, because if you didn't know, there are 3 different types of empathy. So the first one is cognitive empathy. This is the ability to understand what another person might be thinking or feeling. Right. So this is that cognitive piece of it. It does not involve anything emotional or any emotional engagement. Emotional empathy is the ability to share the feelings of another person, and so that you understand it on a deeper level. It's almost sometimes called affective empathy, because it affects or changes you. Right. So your teacher that may be, dealing with the loss of a loved one, and you're empathizing, there's an emotional empathy there. It impacts you. It affects you, how you're feeling and trying to support that teacher. Now, the most active form of empathy is compassionate empathy. It involves not only just having concern for another person and sharing their emotional pain, but also taking practical steps to reduce it. And I think as leaders, school leaders, we use that compassionate empathy a lot, because we are naturally fixers. We want to fix the problems. We want to help the teachers, with whatever they're dealing with. We want to help a student. We want to be there for a parent, right? We want to understand maybe some strife that's happening between 2 groups within, our school community. And so, imagine that one of your staff members is upset and angry because, maybe they had a very bad observation. Acknowledging to them that, hey, that I know that didn't go as you wanted it to. It didn't go as you had planned. Let's work together to see how we can make it go better the next time, right? I think about a conversation that I had with a teacher who wanted to do a lunch bunch with a few students, because she noticed that there was some racist comments being shared back and forth, and she couldn't figure out how to meet the needs. So she had a community meeting with all of them. But what do you think happened? It didn't go. The intent and the impact didn't match up. So we talked about it. She's like, but I wanted everybody to hear each other. And I was like, well, let's think about what we could have done differently. Could you perhaps maybe have met with each group individually first, and then brought some of those concerns together? And I remember when I came to my first school, I noticed that there was some strife between my African-American families, my Hispanic families, my Caucasian families. And so what I did was I had focus groups first with just my Hispanic families, just my Caucasian families, just my African-American families, to hear what their needs were, what their challenges, what they wanted to be celebrated as I moved into, this new school community, and then brought all of them together. So it's really being able to ensure you're listening with a goal to kind of understand, because I think sometimes leaders, we struggle with being empathetic because we may not understand. And I think it's important for us as leaders to be intentional about wanting to understand the life experiences of our school community. Because empathy ain't easy, is it?
It is not, and someone needs to to empathize. You really need to understand to your staff, to the community, to parents, and thank you, Ryan. And we hope that this episode, as given to you today, it will have some new insights on how you can enhance your empathetic leadership skills. Thank you.